Hello, Facebook Live. This is Justin Moser, producer at Business Insider. I'm sitting here with Susana Martinez-Conde, neuroscientist and author of the book Sleights of Mind, which takes a look at the neuroscience behind magicians. So we'll be discussing magic, how magicians deceive us, and we'll also be discussing illusions and even dreaming. So stay tuned and ask your questions in the comments, and we'll hopefully be able to get to them throughout the segment. So Susana, thank you so much for being with us today. Let's start with illusions, and then we'll end up walking over and bring some of these illusions up on screen for you. So can you talk a little bit just about illusions, what they are?
An illusion is a subjective perception that doesn't match physical reality. We assume there's an objective reality out there, but we have never experienced it directly. Every feeling, every sensation, every thought, this is all mediated through our neural hardware and software. So there is a lot of processing, and there is very rarely a perfect match between reality and perception. We call illusions the cases in which the discrepancy is highest, but the fact is that most of our perception, or even all of our perception, is at least partly illusory.
Fantastic. So Alex, let's bring up our first illusion, which I think will be very noticeable to many of you. The infamous dress.
Right.
So this is the famous dress that almost broke the internet a while back. For those people who haven't seen it yet, we have a picture of a dress, and weirdly enough, half of humanity sees the colors as white and gold, and the other half sees them as blue and black. I myself see it as white and gold, and it seems very hard for me to believe that not everybody sees it in the same way. We don't know exactly what makes a specific person see the dress two colors versus the other two colors, but we know now some aspects of the science behind it, why these two specific dress colors. It turns out that the original photo of the dress was taken under conditions of ambiguous illumination. What I mean by that is that there was a double source of lighting that combined yellow and blue. And if you were to illuminate the dress with direct white light, then everybody would see it as blue and black. In a sense, you can say that the dress in reality is blue and black. But when you illuminate it with this hybrid lighting, it looks different to different people. And this has to do with these two specific colors, the yellow and the blue light sources on the dress. And these two colors are special because our visual system has evolved to detect color in conditions of blue or yellow illumination, yellow from sunlight and blue from the sky. So for those of us who see the dress as white and gold, our visual system is assuming that we're looking at the dress on the shade with illumination from the blue sky, and those of us who interpret the dress as being blue and black were considering, or our visual system is implicitly considering, that the dress is under direct yellow sunlight. Continuing the conversation about illusions, I'd like to show you some examples of other illusions that have competed in a contest that we have organized. It's called the Best Illusion of the Year contest. And here you can see, if you look straight at the cross and keep your eyes on the cross, while paying attention to the celebrities on the sides, you will see that after just a few cycles, these faces, which we all know to be beautiful, they become to get very distorted, very ugly. This is all in your head. It's not happening in real life. If you look directly at the images, they're the same beautiful people that we all know and love. Go back at the cross, but pay attention to your peripheral vision, and the pictures start changing again. So this is happening in your brain and it reveals that perception is not an absolute concept. We are constantly putting everything in perspective and in the context of the rest of the input that arrives to our brain, so that what's happening in our visual system as we look at all of these faces is that we are comparing every face with the face that immediately preceded it, so that when we see a face that, say, has an average size nose, but the previous picture had a big nose, then we're going to see it as having a ridiculously small nose. So in a sense, everything is relative to our brains, including beauty. And speaking of perspective, this is an illusion by a scientist named Frederick Kingdom and his colleagues. We're looking at two towers of Pisa that look, it looks like the right one is leaning more than the left one. In reality, it's the same picture, exactly the same picture, left and right. It is only different in your mind. If we now separate the pictures again, the right one appear to be leaning more than the left one, and you can be doing this all day. What's happening is that our brain is interpreting that these two pictures, if they were actual parallel leaning towers of Pisa, as they recede back far from us, they should be converging, just like train tracks appear to converge in the distance. And the fact that these two towers are not converging makes, as they recede, makes our brain think that they must be diverging instead. One last example of an illusion from the context, I should say, is this one. So we have these ramps that appear to go against gravity. They're rolling up instead of rolling down. Why does this happen? Again, it depends on context and perspective, and those ramps that we had imagined to be having the balls falling up, in reality, from a different vantage point, they're just following the laws of gravity as they should.
Fantastic. So now we're going to sit back down, but thank you, Susana, so much for taking a look at those illusions, and we will be making some separate videos about that, so check out Business Insider in the near future to get a closer analysis of those illusions. And while we get kind of reset here, we're going to talk a little bit about magic. And Susana, can you tell us a little bit about your project? I mean, this fascinating look into magicians and kind of the neuroscience behind magicians. And so if you could tell us a little bit about that project, and then just tell us, how do magicians trick or deceive us?
Well, how magicians deceive us, it's a combination of factors. This is a project that started back in 2006, 2007, in collaboration with my colleague Stephen Macknick. We started looking at the neuroscience behind magic tricks, and we were intrigued by the possibility that magicians, as many artists do, they're very good observers of human behavior and of human perception. So we thought that just like you may see an illusion of perspective in a painting, and that might tell you something important about the workings of the visual system, we could be figuring out what magicians are doing with attention and cognition, and put their hypothesis to the test and take the lessons to the lab and understand more about how the human mind works.
Fantastic.
And one of the main ways in which magicians are able to manipulate our attention is basically by getting us to multitask. So we now know from a research perspective, and even from anecdotal experience, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, multitasking is a myth. We may think that we're able to do several things at once, but the fact is that when we are dividing our attention, we become a lot less effective than if we were doing just a single task at once. at a time. So magicians take this divide and conquer approach with attention. Typically, they're going to ask you to divide your attention in many different locations on stage, or even they're going to generate an internal dialogue so that you're having a conversation with yourself inside of your head. What is happening? What's the situation right now? And while you're driving your attention inwards, or you're allocating it in competing places, you become a lot less effective at finding out the secret behind the magical effect.
And when I was reading a little bit further into that, I guess that works perfectly with kind of the pickpocketing tricks, right? So a lot of times these magicians will try to pickpocket the person on stage, but at the same time they're talking to them. You want to talk a little bit about the pickpocketing?
So in terms of pickpocketing, one of the magicians that we have collaborated with is Apollo Robbins, and he specializes in theatrical pickpocketing. And some of the things that he does is that he will call a volunteer onto the stage, and he will touch that person in different parts of their body, directing their attention to those specific locations. At the same time, he's talking to them basically non-stop, and he's also generating this internal dialogue. He may be asking this person a seemingly very easy question to respond to, like what is the year on this coin? And that, and you might think that this is not going to take away a lot of computational resources from your brain, but the fact that you're listening to the question and producing an answer to the question, even if the magician just asks you what your name is, it doesn't take that much mental effort, you would think, but it's derailing your attention from this other very complicated task that is what the magician is doing with your belongings at the same time.
Great, and let's switch gears a little bit from the magicians. You also know a little bit about dreaming. So can you talk a little bit about dreams, just what they are? I mean, what is happening to our brains? What is a dream, and what is happening to our brains when we dream?
Well, a dream is a different state of consciousness than what we have when we're awake. And these are, especially when we are having a dream, not just when we are sleeping, this is a very interesting situation because there are certain features of brain activity and of eye movement patterns that are similar to when we are awake. And you have heard of rapid eye movements during sleep, and those are eye movements that are very similar to the movements that we might produce while we are awake, and are an indication that the person is actually having a dream with a content and with a narrative at the same time.
And what about lucid dreaming? Can you explain what that is?
A lucid dream is a situation, is sort of a hybrid between being awake and having a dream, because it is a dream in which you have at least some access or a lot of access to your awareness that this is a dream. So you're having this dream, and you're aware that this is not true, that you are dreaming at the same time. And as you realize this, then you can go even further and you can control aspects of the dream, or you can choose to wake yourself up if you're awake, if you're having a nightmare, or you can just go with the dream and do things like fly or just have fun while you're having the dream. And this is an area of research that has generated quite a few studies for a while, and in the last several years, trying to determine what is happening during lucid dreaming. And one area of research that I find fascinating is communicating with people while they're having a lucid dream. And you can do this by, as I mentioned, even though while we're having a dream, we're typically paralyzed and we cannot move, which is useful because we wouldn't be wanting to just walk around as we're having this dream in general, but we are moving our eyes. And so when somebody who is a frequent lucid dreamer is participating in the research study, they will have decided in advance what specific patterns of eye movements they are going to produce once they realize they are in a dream. So they're not going to open their eyes, they're going to keep their eyes closed, but they're going to say, look, left, right, left, or whatever pre-decided pattern. And this will be the signal to the scientists that the person is not being aware that they're dreaming, so they can look further into their brain activity patterns and all sorts of things.
Very interesting. And is there a way to become, I don't know, I guess a better lucid dreamer? Is there a way to train yourself to realize that you are in a dream and that you can, at that point, control things in your dream consciously?
Mm-hmm. So lucid dreams are not so uncommon, and in fact there is research that suggests that you can train yourself to some extent to have lucid dreams more often and to have more control over your lucid dreams when you have them. In research scenarios, researchers may, for instance, when to help people have lucid dreams, somebody will be in a sleep laboratory, and then from their, say, eye movement pattern, they will realize this person is having a dream. Not necessarily a lucid dream, but this person is dreaming. And they will wake this person up then and ask that person to talk about their dream and to identify the features. Now that they're awake and they know that they have just been dreaming, can they think about the features of the dream that would be suggestive that this was not a real world situation, right? And there's everybody can come up with examples, and that in the movie Inception there were a couple of those. We can talk about that some, but just by recognizing that you had a dream and there were all of these weird things about it that you should have suspected this was not real, that is going to make you more likely to identify the situation when it happens in the future. Now, I'm not saying that we should all participate in lucid dream studies and go to a sleep lab, but something that you can do is, for instance, have a dream diary. So when you have a dream, write it down the next morning as soon as you remember to do this, and think about these features that were strange or unusual that might help you identify this is a dream the next time it happens. And just by doing this and having the intent before you go to sleep that I'm going to dream and I'm going to try my hardest to realize that I'm in the middle of the dream, and that often has the effect of helping you identify these scenarios. And just in general, the fact is that over half of the people, studies say 55% or so of people have had at least one lucid dream in their lives, and 25% or so are frequent lucid dreamers, having an average of one lucid dream a month. So it's not that rare.
And you did mention Inception, so let's talk a little bit about Inception. I know that they would always look at that spinning top to kind of determine if they were dreaming or not. Can you talk a little bit about Inception, maybe some things that they got right or maybe some things that bothered you about the movie?
Well, I thought the movie Inception was very well done. Of course, the degree of control that the characters in the movie had over their dreams, that goes well beyond to what most or even all lucid dreamers would have. And there was this recurrent element of having a dream within a dream within a dream and so on. So all of these layers of complexity, I don't think that this is a typical situation at all. Another element that for the sake of the movie they had to do it like this, but I don't think it's necessarily realistic, is that even when we are in a dream, even when we are in a lucid dream, we are not the most rational person, because we are in this hybrid state between being awake and being dreaming, and when we're having a dream and we are actors in this dream, and we're having all of these sorts of strange behavior that we wouldn't have in real life, and that is to a degree because, for instance, the activity in our prefrontal lobes is diminished while we sleep, so we're not real rational agents even when we are having lucid dreams, we are not behaving in the way we would as we are awake. In the movie Inception, of course, everybody was perfectly rational and having very clear goals and motivations while dreaming. But one aspect of Inception that I have found helpful in my own lucid dreams and that I did remember in this particular lucid dream was about, in the movie they say, okay, you are here having this situation in this environment. Do you remember? How did you get here? Did you came here? Did you take a cab? Did you walk? How did you get here? And if you cannot tell, that's a big indication that you are in a dream. And in fact, I'm an occasional lucid dreamer myself, and I have experience being in a dream scenario in which the environment just changed instantly. I was in this room and then I'm in a different place with no intervening traveling. So that's a big clue that something's up.
What about animals? Do they have similar patterns as humans? Do they dream like humans, or is that completely different?
Animals, we think that as researchers that they do dream as humans do. Of course, we can only arrive to this conclusion indirectly, because it's not like we can ask the animal, now describe me if you had a dream and what sort of dream it was. But we know that some of the structures that are involved in dreaming are very primitive structures in the brain, like the brainstem. So, and that appears to be engaged in the control of sleep and dreaming states, basically in people as well as in mammals, such as rodents and so on.
And let's talk about nightmares for a little bit. Is there a way to prevent nightmares? I mean, is it true that kind of what you think about right before you go to sleep does have a very direct impact on what you're going to dream about?
Well, in the laboratory, scientists have been able to induce nightmares in a variety of ways, but it basically comes down to, especially for nightmares that maybe, for instance, in studies of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, you may induce nightmares from physiological stress or from psychological stress. So if you're going through a situation that is generating anxiety, or if you're sick, or if you're distressed in a variety of ways, then you're going to be more likely to have a nightmare that night than if you were completely relaxed and everything in your life is going well and you have no reason to worry. So I would say how to prevent nightmares. You're going to be somewhere limited, but there are things that you can potentially do. Of course, if you keep yourself healthy and relaxed, and that perhaps meditating before you go to sleep, and just we have more control while we are asleep over our consciousness states, and these lucid dreams demonstrate that we have more control than you might think of. So if you set yourself up and just express to yourself the intent that you're going to have good dreams, you may be more likely to have them. So that's part of the answer. And the other part is, of course, if you have trained yourself to recognize lucid dreams and you are having a nightmare that night, then you may be in a good position to recognize this is actually not happening and wake yourself up from it.
Fantastic. And I think we may have one or two questions from the Facebook community. Alex, if you want to ask those questions.
Sure thing. Okay, one of our viewers asks, why do I not dream? I used to have vivid dreams about 8 years ago.
It's a hard question to answer. There seems to be individual differences between how much people dream, how much control they have over their dreams. But also it's important to realize that we are cycling through the night. And so we're only typically going to remember a dream if you wake up right in the middle of the dream or immediately afterwards. So if your sleep cycle has changed for whatever reason, it may be that now you are waking up in the morning when you are in a non-dreaming sleep cycle and things used to be different 8 years ago. That could be an answer.
Okay, we have another question from one of our viewers. Is there a possibility of the development of a device that may look into our dreams and record them?
Well, can our dreams be recorded by a device? In that sense, dreams are not different from the rest of our subjective experience, and our thoughts, our imaginations, our memories. Can we look into somebody else's mind? And theoretically, I see in principle that there may be no obstacle to eventually being able to know with technology exactly what somebody else is thinking, and that through functional imaging studies, for instance, and so on. But right now, and some efforts have been made in that direction, and there's been some progress, but we are very far away. We don't have the spatial resolution or the temporal resolution. This may happen eventually, perhaps not in our lifetimes. So I would say that for the time being, our dreams and our thoughts are private and safe.
Why is it harder to remember the beginning of your dreams versus the end?
It may have to do, it's not something that I had wondered about before. It rings true, and it may have to do again with when you wake up. So you're only going to be able to access in this very fragile equilibrium of your consciousness while you're asleep and your consciousness while you're awake, in this bridge in between, the access is really going to be only there for the most recent part while you happen to be awake. And that if the beginning of the dream happened a while back, then you may have less of an access to it. And that something interesting to mention actually is that time in the dreams is subjectively longer than time while we are awake. And that different studies vary in the precise amount, but there's a sort of consensus that time while we are dreaming, it's like 40% longer than time in real life.
Okay, and another question from one of our viewers is, in which part of the sleeping cycle do humans dream, and which waves are dominating?
Well, we are dreaming during the rapid eye movement cycle, and that so this is a situation in which is sort of a paradox. People used to call it paradoxical sleep because we appear to be, for the most part, awake. And so you can detect this by putting electro-oculograms around the eyes so that researchers can tell while you're having these rapid eye movements and wake up the person. And when these discoveries were initially made, it was surprising that when the eyes are moving in such a pattern, the person happened to have a dream with actual content.
Now, what's the significance of common dreams such as you're being chased or you're falling off a mountain, your teeth are falling out? Are they related to stress at all?
Well, nightmares in general appear to be related to, as I mentioned, to physiological or psychological stress. Why are there some dreams that appear to be recurring and others are not? I don't think that we have an answer to that question, or even to the question about why do we have dreams at all? Is this just garbage neural activity that happens in our brain, or does it serve some sort of functional purpose?
Fantastic. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Susana, for taking the time and for answering some of the community questions. If you guys are just checking in with us now, be sure to watch the video from the start. We looked at a bunch of illusions, talked a little bit about magicians and how they trick and deceive us. On that note, please check out her book, Sleights of Mind, which goes very much deeper into that magician science. So thank you so much for checking in, and also take a look at Business Insider for some follow-up videos with all sorts of stuff, illusions and magicians and sleep and dreams. So thank you so much, and enjoy your day. Bye.